So welcome to Legally Everywhere, where we looking into everything. We legally looking into everything. And my baby, we gonna have to get into these receipts. And today's not about breaking news. This video is not about breaking news. This is about understanding systems. So we have to understand the history. We gotta really move through this stuff chronologically so we can make sense of what's happening in current day, current events. Because otherwise, current events are not gonna make sense. They're not gonna make sense at all. But I promise you, I got the receipts, I got the tea. Baby, it's gonna make a little bit more sense as we move through these PowerPoints. Yes, I did put some PowerPoints together for y'all. So watch this. Wait 1 second. Wait 1 second. I wanna say this. We're going from oil to currency to governance. Yes, I did say governance. We all up in these receipts. And that's how we gotta get there. We gotta move in sequence. So follow along. Hold up, I almost got too far ahead of myself. Let me get y'all the first slide. Why asking about the oil is the wrong question. Because when I say first, it's not just the oil, right? It's not just that. So you got to go oil, currency, governance. So now let's start. So as you all can see, this story is fundamentally about resource. Let me put my head to the camera. Resources, power, and who controls them. Because this is the part we really got to really, really we gotta bite into it because it's juicy and it's succulent. It's not just about having the asset itself, it's about who controls the asset. And that's where this story gets really, really interesting. So fundamentally, it's about what resources, power, and who controls them. It's about sovereignty versus influence, wealth versus access. We gotta get into these receipts, right? Because it's a whole history that's behind this conflict. If we don't kind of break some of that down, I promise some of the stuff happening current events is not gonna make sense. So let's jump into pre-1998. So let's jump before then. Let's jump to the next slide. So Venezuela, at this point, we are 1998. Venezuela holds the largest proven oil reserve in the world, right? And it's important to also note that the oil industry was naturalized in 1970. But one thing I really wanted to point out was like relationship and dynamics, right? Because Venezuela, they had the oil, right? So they had the asset, but they did not have what? They did not have the control over the asset. They had these contracts that were in place. It's kind of like having a contract with someone and you're saying, okay, listen, maybe I don't have certain kind of, let's say, other assets. Maybe I don't feel like I have power to make certain deals, or maybe I don't have the plug, the connection to get in certain rooms to move this the way I need to, but I know I have this product, this asset, and I just need to be able to move it, right? Bring you into this equation so you can help me work this situation out. Well, they sitting in the rooms and they like, okay, you seeing the money move, but the money ain't moving right because you like, hold up. I'm not getting an appropriate cut of money that I feel like is appropriate. So let's do a quick analogy, right? Quick little analogy. We think back to the 90s, similar time framing, right? And we think back to the music industry when they had those groups, and we had a few let's say musicians and artists that literally we seen them touring, they were everywhere, right? They have this talent, they have this asset, right? But they had other people managing their money, the funding aspect of it. So then they go online and tell us, they're like, listen, y'all, we broke. Like, you broke, you touring. We got your album everywhere. We see your face everywhere. You're doing everything, right? They're the hot girl or the hot girl group, right? They are this hot commodity. What oil is always going to be the hot commodity, right? They were not in control of the money. They were not really in control of it. So what ended up happening? Let's call it an imbalance of control, right? The contracts that they had favored foreign entities and bodies. Therefore, when they were looking at the money, they're like, wait a minute, the money looks funny and I don't like that. They were sitting on it for a second, but then, over time, that becomes uncomfortable to be sitting in such an unequal, right, situation. So here they have these massive reserves. It says right on the screen, one of the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Right, you like big bank take little bank. We should have lots of money. But that's not what was happening. They were getting less than what they felt like they should be getting. So let's move to the next slide. Y'all ready? Hopefully it's starting to make a little bit more sense already. Just want to make sure I point out real quick and show you this part of the PowerPoint. The pattern was clear, right? What oil belongs to Venezuela on paper, right? That's on paper. They're looking at it. But the power over the pricing, the extraction terms, profit distribution, largely was external. What those were being handled by foreign entities. So what the wealth was flowing outward and the feeling and the sense of inequality was growing inward, right? There was discomfort. Let's call it some extreme discomfort. Now let's go to the next moment part. Child, tongue tied, right? I'm putting all stuff together, y'all. I'm tongue tied. Y'all got me by the edges trying to put this together. You hear me? All right, y'all. So the best way I can try to articulate this is populism fills economic gaps, right? Because you have to think the oil revenues enriched the elites, right? The foreign corporations. But your ordinary, everyday Venezuelan, as it was reported, struggled with poverty and limited opportunities. They're like, why am I surrounded by all this wealth, but I don't get to benefit from that, right? And fueled like public anger with the elites because like we trusted you. We believed your words, right? You gave us all this lip service, but here it is. I feel what? I feel betrayed by the leaders because we trusted y'all. So you end up with this like internal conflict, right? The nation is divided. And then there also becomes this inherent distrust of U.S. aligned policies. Keep that in mind. That's something you really want to kind of pin. You really want to pin that. So, like I said, pin that emotion, right? When people feel robbed, you always have to feel when someone feels robbed, betrayed, mistreated, abused, neglected, or what have you, whatever the emotion, the raw emotion is, there's always someone who's going to show up and say, what? I'm going to fix that. Elect me, pick me, choose me. And that's what happened. That's the way I read and interpret it. That's how Hugo Chavez got elected in 1998. So that brings us to what? 1998. Now let's note he was democratically elected. He was elected before all the conversational authoritarianism comes into place. He was actually elected by popular vote. He was elected by popular vote. He was elected by popular vote, kind of based off that notion of what I'm gonna fix this issue that we see here, that these elites is getting all this money and all this stuff is going here. We're gonna get resources and things back to us and opportunities back to us. Let's stick with that and move forward. So what I'm trying to say was that the initial transition was constitutional and follow established democratic procedures, right? The shift comes after, but there is a shift. Hold on. From populism to authoritarianism, right? Erosion is always gradual, right? No matter what the relationship is, the context is always gradual. Gradual in the sense of this situation being expanded executive powers, right? Concentrating decision making in executive branches. We see this in modern day. We see this in modern time, y'all. Weakened checks and balances, right? We've seen that even in what? Modern time. We've seen these kind of dynamics, right? Populism to authoritarianism. At that time, under Chavez administration or regime, this is what they were experiencing, right? And then they had a constitutional restructuring. I think at times people don't like parallels, but you have to have parallels. You have to say it's apples versus oranges for someone to understand that this is a comparison between apples and oranges. You need comparators. You need to have those kinds of conversations. Although you may not like the comparison, you can't deny that there's merit to comparisons. I want you to stay tuned for part 2. There'll likely be 3 parts to this as we break this down and bring it to modern day. We go move and transition into the conversation of Project 25 and governance. Stay tuned. We are legally everywhere looking at everything. I will see you in the next video.